Good morning. Let us start our worship service today with our first hymn, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning, number 153. 153. Please stand as you're able. Please be seated. My name is Lisa Jennings. We are glad you have joined us today at the First Unitarian Church of Memphis, also known as the Church of the River. Whether you're in person or virtually, it's nice to see everyone here today. We come together in religious community to affirm our covenant, combining freedom of individual belief with support for one another's journey through life. We are pleased to have in our pulpit our Minister Emeritus, the Reverend Burton Carley. Some announcements today. For those in attendance, assisted listening devices are available upon request. Please see one of our ushers or staff who will please raise their hands. There they are. If those items will allow you to better experience our worship service. Parking is available in the Channel 3 lot on Sundays between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. for those who are physically able to walk to our services. This Sunday, we move to a low COVID risk level. Mask and social distancing are not mandatory, but strongly encouraged. Food and drink may be consumed indoors. Our nursery and preschool rooms are now open for children 4 and younger from 10 a.m. to 12. All children must be registered before attending, and children in the sanctuary are always welcome, but if they prefer a more comfortable location from which to watch the live stream, the Mississippi River Room across the patio is open for families. I'm sad to announce the death of a beloved member and past president, Mr. David Blaylock. Our heart certainly goes out to Betty and to family. There will be a memorial service on May 21st at 11 a.m. here at the church. Next Sunday is Flower Communion Sunday. This service was created by Norbert Kapek in 1923 who founded the Unitarian Church in Czechoslovakia. It's an annual ritual that celebrates beauty, human uniqueness, diversity, and community. Together, the different flowers that we bring will make a beautiful bouquet. Our common bouquet would not be the same without the addition of each individual flower, and thus it is with our church community. So try to remember to bring a flower next Sunday, and then you're offered to take a different flower home. The awesome little choir meets on Sunday mornings at 9:45 a.m. in the sanctuary. So choir, please come for a short rehearsal prior to the Sunday morning service. If you are interested in serving as a delegate to the General Assembly, that's the annual UUA meeting next month, please let our board president, Christopher Douglas, know no later than tomorrow. Our first Sunday walk in the park is today after church at 1 o'clock, not 3 o'clock. Check with our facilities and events manager, Chris Swinson, for more information. In addition, volunteers are needed to digitize Burton's sermons. If you are interested, please check with Chris Swinson. Also, if you are a first-time visitor, please fill out a visitor's form on our website. And if you are interested in joining our church, please see an usher or staff member, or contact the church office or the board president, anyone who has membership here, and they will guide you in the right direction. For more details on these and other Church of the River events and activities, email info@churchoftheriver.org, not on the river, just remember of the river, and subscribe to our weekly mailing list and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I think that ends the announcements, and we'll begin our worship service.
This is the day we have been given. A day that took the universe billions of years to present to us. A day salted with blue light, rubbed in the glory of this green growing spring, and for us, a brown God flowing through it. We did not create this day. We have not earned it, don't even deserve it. And regardless of our circumstances in life, this day is ours to seek the good thereof. Let us therefore rejoice and be glad in it. We light our chalice this morning. May it remind us of the flame of freedom. Amen. Well, we're going to sing again. For those of the choir and that went to our partner church in Transylvania and sang with the great choir from Sepsi St. George, the Unitarius Templum, this was a song they sang for us as we came to worship Sunday, and it brought tears to our eyes. May we sing it well and loudly. This is my song, number 159. Let us rise as we are able.
So yes, my solution to not crying is to not sing that song, because I can't. Here's a real change of pace. I'm Cindy Hastings Sakaan, the Director of Religious Education, here with a fable as our time for all ages. Aesop, here's the educator in me. Aesop was a storyteller who lived 2,500 years ago, about, in ancient Greece. His favorite kind of story to tell was a fable. And a fable is a very short story with a lesson to teach. Now, some scholars think Aesop never really existed. Others believe he was a slave in ancient Greece. And there's no record that Aesop ever wrote anything down. He probably just remembered the stories he told because he told the same ones over and over again. 2,000 years later, a monk wrote down the tales of talking animals and little lessons, and they have become known as Aesop's fables. Today's fable is the story of the wolf and the lamb. A stray lamb stood drinking early one morning on the bank of a woodland stream. That very same morning, a very hungry wolf came by farther up the stream, hunting for something to eat. He soon got his eyes on the lamb. As a rule, Mr. Wolf snapped up such delicious morsels without making any bones about it. But this lamb looked so very helpless and innocent that the wolf felt he ought to have some kind of an excuse for taking its life. "How dare you paddle around in my stream and stir up all the mud?" he shouted fiercely. "You deserve to be punished severely for your rashness." "But your highness," trembled the lamb, "do not be angry. I cannot possibly muddy the water you are drinking up here. Remember, you are upstream and I am downstream." "You do muddy it," retorted the wolf savagely. "And besides, I've heard that you told lies about me last year." "How could I have done so?" pleaded the lamb. "I wasn't even born." "Well, if it wasn't you, it was your brother." "I have no brothers." "Well then," snarled the wolf, "it was someone in your family anyway. But no matter who it was, I do not intend to be talked out of my breakfast." And without more words, the wolf seized the lamb and carried her off to the forest. The lesson of the story: the tyrant can always find an excuse for his tyranny. The unjust will not listen to the reasoning of the innocent. And with this, we bless our children to follow me out for further moral tales of talking animals. With these words: you are beloved. You are beloved. You are important. You are important. You are powerful. You are powerful. Go in peace. Go in peace.
Our first reading this morning is an ancient text from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 7, verses 15 through 26. These verses are part of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, when we talk about the Sermon on the Mount, I don't want you to think about Jesus standing on a mountain preaching these verses. When Matthew wrote this book, he had before him Mark and a document known as Q, which we have never seen literally, but we know exists because of how other people used it. Q was a collection of the sayings and parables of Jesus. And Matthew collected the sayings he wanted to use and had Jesus give them on the Mount. So the Sermon on the Mount is a collection of these things and not a true historical event. I also like to send you away from here on Sundays with little-known facts. So if you remember nothing else, you might take home a little-known fact. And here's your little-known biblical fact, that there are over 500 references to sheep in the Bible. This says that sheep were very important to the life of these people and provided ample metaphors and symbols. The sheep provided food to eat, milk to drink, wool for clothing, covering for tents, and also a medium of exchange. Your wealth was measured by how many sheep you owned. The metaphors used throughout the Bible with sheep included their nature of gregariousness, their docility, their tendency to wander or stray, how they are humble, easily led, and for our purposes today, easily victimized, those sheep. So, this is Matthew speaking through the voice of Jesus. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? So, every sound tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears evil fruit. A sound tree cannot bear evil fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. Here ends our ancient reading. I want to thank Debbie for choosing for the musical selections for our worship today, all music from Ukraine. Our second reading, a modern reading from a book titled Terror and Liberalism by Paul Burton. He is a political and cultural critic whose writings have appeared in the New Republic, the New York Times Magazine, the New York Times Book Review, Slate, and other publications. What Mr. Burton does is give us some modern historical context for the conflict in the Ukraine. He writes, the whole experience of Europe and North America during an entire century, from the end of Napoleon's wars to the First World War, have tended to be one of visible progress, and progress makes strength. The ancient evils of suffering, poverty, and exploitation continued being ancient evils, and yet during those 100 years, the Western countries seem to have discovered the secret of human advancement, seemed to be making forward strides in the here and now, seemed to have discovered the principle that if allowed to function would continue to generate progress indefinitely into the future. Science, rational thought, and general education seem to be steadily moving forward. Superstition, ignorance, and illiteracy seem to be in retreat. Technology and industry advanced. Wealth increased. Human rights spread somewhat. Democracy and self-government grew stronger, at least in some countries. And what was the secret behind those many areas of progress, the all-powerful, all-conquering principle? It was the recognition that all of life is not governed by a single, all-knowing, and all-powerful authority, by a divine force. It was the tolerant idea that every phase of human activity, science, technology, politics, religion, private life, should operate independently of the others without trying to yoke everything together under a single guiding hand. It was a belief in the many instead of the one. It was an insistence on freedom of thought and freedom of action, not on absolute freedom, but on something truer, stronger, and more reliable than absolute freedom, which is relative freedom, a freedom that recognizes the existence of other freedoms too. Freedom consciously arrived at, freedom that is chosen and not just bestowed on high. The idea was, in the broadest sense, liberalism. Liberalism not as a rigid doctrine, but liberalism as a state of mind, a way of thinking about life and about reality. But then there arose a rebellion against liberalism and against democracy, the belief in the freedom of the many, a rebellion that turned into the Second World War. And the ideal was always the same, though each movement gave it a different name. These movements being the fascist movement, the communist movement. It was not a belief in skepticism and doubt. It was the ideal of submission. It was submission to the kind of authority that liberal civilization had slowly undermined, and which the new movements wished to reestablish a novel basis. It was the ideal of the one instead of the many. The ideal of something, someone God-like, the total state, the total doctrine, the total movement, totalitarian was Mussolini's word. And as Mussolini told all the Italians, he spoke for all. Here ends our second reading from Paul Berman. Let us now prepare ourselves for a time of prayer, meditation, and thought. In that attitude, let us be. O holy and creative power, let loose into time and space and into our very lives. We gather today knowing both gratitude and the constant beat of the drums of war. We come here knowing that between that gratitude and that war, we dwell. And so we give thanks for hearts that learn to love, and through that agency of love, give help to those displaced, wounded, hungry, grieved, traumatized by the terror visited upon them. We give thanks for minds that understand, and through that understanding, respond with courage and wisdom. Of course, we give thanks for the beauty that surrounds us, and through that awareness, protect its fragile nature. We give thanks for the Spirit. Oh, that Spirit that is our capacity for appreciative awareness, and through that Spirit to nurture the better angels of our nature. Oh, Holy One, things come to us we do not desire. Keep us strong in our faith that it is indeed love that casts out fear. And as in all things, help us to move beyond ourselves to others, to be companions with those walking through the valley of the shadows. And so may it be. Amen. Do you know how special we are? Truly. How special it is to have a free pulpit. How special it is for you to sit in free pews. Now, they're not free financially. But what is going on here today is almost not going on anywhere else in any other sanctuary in this city. And you know what that is? The gap between those pews and this pulpit are almost non-existent. I can preach my free mind, and you can listen with your free ears. And this has absolutely nothing to do with agreement. It has to do with how we forge our spiritual lives through our capacity to be in relationship with one another, a relationship not based on correct belief, but upon right relationship, based upon being touchstones for each other, for growing our souls. And now we get the opportunity to support that free pulpit and free pews, our free church. There are many ways to do this. You'll find in the back of the sanctuary above the credenza a black box. You can actually put your checks in there. There's a text-to-give number. That's 901-350-2686. You can scan the QR code on the back of your order of service. You can go to our website, churchoftheriver.org, and hit the donate button. We hope that you will be generous in the support of this church and its ministry. As you do that, I'd like to remind you of something St. Emerson once said. He said, and think about it, he said, $1 is not a value, but representative of value, and at last of moral values. Let us be generous for those values that we live in our daily lives through this church. Your generosity will now be received. When Sam asked me to take the pulpit in his absence this Sunday, I asked if I might continue the theme of the April worship services, and he graciously consented. And so, I say to you, wake up. Is that not why we are here? To be awakened from our sleepwalking, from our 2-year COVID sheltering, to once again pay attention to what really matters? Is not awakening the prime directive, the purpose that enfolds all purposes? I think we tend to believe that awakening is transformative in itself. And certainly it's essential, it's important for the opening of the door, but the transformation itself hinges on whether one walks through that door or not. That is why the purpose that enfolds all purposes requires the virtue of all virtues. The prime virtue, what did the Greeks teach you? What's the prime virtue? I think it's Aristotle. It's courage. Why? Because without courage, you cannot practice any of the other virtues. And so awakening is paying attention, seeing rather than just looking, turning aside and noticing what has not been seen before. It's the moment of recognition. It's a revelation. And here's the thing. There is a reason we practice willed ignorance. Because there is the pain of dislocation when we walk through that door of our awakening to meet a new reality. I'm reminded of the words of one of my favorite authors, the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick. If you know him, you know that his works engage in that bleeding line between reality and illusion. He said, reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. So you walk through that door and you are challenged to give up some of your precious illusions like the war to end all wars, illusions like never again. It takes courage after our awakening to walk through the door of perception, because when you approach the reality of the burning bush on the other side or the wolf in sheep's clothing and engage it, you're changed. And something new is required of you, of us. I think of poor Moses, how he must have regretted turning aside to be awakened by the burning bush that would not be consumed. The holy presence of Yahweh. And awakened to the pain and the suffering and the oppression of his people in Egypt, he was given the task to help liberate them. But Moses consistently deflects the responsibility asked of him. He offers one excuse after another why he is certainly not the right person for this job. He is unwilling to open himself up to the risk of a different alternative. And in the safety of his exile, he did not believe anymore in the possibility of change for the plight of his people. And when that happens, it is the death of the Spirit. The revelation of the burning bush, the awakening, was that he had to give up that illusion. Sometimes under extreme pressure, human beings like Ukrainian President Zelensky grow to meet their demands. And sometimes human beings regress in order to escape them. Awakening always presents us with a choice that always requires courage. The purpose of all purposes needs the virtue of all virtues to actually be transformative in our lives and institutions. Which brings me to the inhumanity of the war in Ukraine. Every day, our variety of screens display warnings that disturbing pictures or video are about to be shown. Think about that. Think about that. And we are presented with images of destruction and suffering, I swear to you, too great to bear. For me, there is the person sprawled on the street with a sack of groceries lying near the body. There is the bombing of the maternity hospital and the scene of a pregnant and bloodied woman being carried away on a stretcher. And the temptation is to close our minds, to close our eyes, to close our hearts, rather than to bear witness to it, to acknowledge it instead of running away, to look at our individual and collective relationships to it. I know who wants to wake up to this. Of course, the wolf in sheep's clothing hopes you will not, and will exclaim that the Russian military does not target civilians and the dead lying in the streets are Ukrainian actors. This is what false prophets do. They deceive. They pretend to be something they are not. And so there is this messianic dream of recapturing the former glory of the USSR and the lie of saving Russian-speaking Ukrainian citizens from neo-Nazi persecution, somehow totally avoiding the fact that President Zelensky is Jewish. In Aesop's fable, The Wolf and the Lamb, read this morning, the lamb attempts to save itself. How? Through moral reasoning. The wolf, however, counters with the clever rationalizations that justifies seizing the lamb. The moral being that a tyrant will always find an excuse for his tyranny and will go to the negotiation table in a disingenuous way without listening to the reasoning of the innocent. There's even a more bracing insight that comes from Rabbi Friedman of family systems theory. He said that one factor in the enabling of a terrorist, or a ravenous wolf in this case, is to have an unreasonable faith in reasonableness. When I mentioned this to our DRE, she responded, "That's a struggle for real." And so it is. For the more famous rabbi teaching in Matthew's gospel, the problem with disguised wolves is who they are. And who are they? People of bad character. And so Jesus says good fruit does not come from a bad tree. Pay attention more to what a person does rather than what is said. Actions, he is teaching, are the fruit of character. That is why one of our 19th century Unitarian founders, William Ellery Channing in Boston, said to the people in his pews that the purpose of our church is salvation by character. And how do you negotiate with a nation who promised, along with the US of A and along with the UK, to protect you from attack in exchange for giving up all your Soviet-era nuclear weapons, and then proceeds to invade you a few years later? Wolves in sheep's clothing hide intent by leading you away from the truth rather than revealing it. Pope John Paul II was once asked a very intriguing hypothetical question. He was proposed that suppose the entire Bible was destroyed, what one sentence or phrase would you want preserved for humanity's future? And he said without hesitation, from John 8:32, the truth will make you free. Pope John Paul II speaks about awakening, speaks about the liberating power of seeing things as they are and describing them honestly. And is it not true that without the awareness of how things are wrong, there can be no redemption? This is why we have to wake up. Tyrants, autocrats, dictators, authoritarian and totalitarian regimes cannot, will not tolerate truth. How many of you remember reading George Orwell's famous novel 1984? It made a big impression on me as an adolescent. You'll remember it's about a totalitarian future. And in that dystopian state, the Ministry of Truth displays 3 slogans of the party: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. It sort of reminds me of the disingenuous titles for certain pieces of legislature that actually do the opposite of what their title means. These slogans represent the power of the state to create a vacuum where truth does not exist. You might remember the main character, Winston. He actually works for the records department. You know what his job was? Remember? He rewrote newspaper articles. He changed history. He altered facts. He even erased people from the record, from memory. But he fell in love, and he was captured and tortured as a thought criminal. Winston's interrogator, O'Brien, instructs, I quote, "Whatever the party holds to be true is truth. It is only true when you look through the eyes of the party. And there is only one, the one true party, the one true religion, the one true race, the one true nation, and the many must submit to the one." Paul Berman, in his book Terror and Liberalism, I read from this morning, states that the theme of the one and the many has been the underlying dynamic in world politics and religion since the birth of liberal democracy. See, these two ideas are in conflict, and we have yet to work them out in our human evolution. The root conviction of those who seek to create the ideal society, the pure society, the perfect society, is that the central questions of human life have one true answer, which can be discovered and implemented. Berman points out that liberal democracy developed when it recognized something really different, that all of life is not governed by a single, all-knowing, and all-powerful authority. And so this allowed science and technology and politics and religion and private life to separate, to operate independently from each other without being yoked under one authority. This was the recognition of the many over the one, and an insistence on freedom of thought and action. Now, there is a problem, and that problem, of course, is that freedom is messy. After all, we elected Obama, and then we elected Trump. How much more messy can that be? There is constant dialogue and tension between freedom and responsibility, between morality and beliefs, and the different ways to pursue our happiness. There is more uncertainty, more doubt, a competition of ideas, and the freedom to explore in the liberal order. And the point is that no one can have everything he or she wants. The denial of this, the search for a single overarching ideal because it is the only true way for humanity, invariably leads to coercion and some form of totalitarianism that can be on the left or the right, can be religious, it can be secular. It's all the same. This is the conflict of ideas that still rages from the 20th century into the 21st, and its outcome is not settled, as we know from 9/11 and as we know from February 24th. It is the contest between democracy and authoritarianism, a contest between the many and the one. And so it is that Russia's war against Ukraine brings moral clarity to what is at stake. And this is what I say to you, that unless democracies defend themselves, the forces of autocracy will destroy them. And what I have come to accept, hear me, not gladly, not gleefully, but soberly, realistically, is that in a world where the tolerant and the intolerant must coexist, it is only possible when the tolerant exercise their moral and material power. We've woken up. We've come to understand that the norms and the rules and the treaties of the old liberal world order will not save democracy if we are unwilling to wake up and take courage. All you need to do is look at the current and recent abandonment of democratic norms in our own nation. I think Winston Churchill put it so well. He said, the Second World War came about not only because of the malice of the wicked, the wolves in sheep's clothing, but also because it was reinforced by the virtuous, the weakness of the virtuous. And I believe that Aesop and Matthew's Jesus and Berman would all agree. And so I was stunned after Ukraine was invaded to read a poll that asked folks that if the United States was invaded, how many would you stay and not escape? Would you stay and would you fight for your nation and freedom? Only 55% of the respondents said yes. You want to know what's worse? 68% of them are Republicans and only 40% were Democrats. Our democracy cannot remain unless we are willing to exercise the strength of our beliefs in the many rather than the one. And I say to you, there are moments in history when what people do make a difference for generations to come. And I think of the people of Ukraine. I cry at the TV almost every night, who are sacrificing their lives for their newfound freedom, for their young democracy based on plurality, multicultural and diverse. And I think of our own colonial battle against empire and how it was France that made our victory possible. And I look at Ukraine, and what do I see? I see the birth, the possible birth of a new America. And so do not ponder what difference our church makes in the world, in this nation, and in our state, because the spiritual purpose of our church, this church, and the people in it is always and has been to institutionalize religious freedom, because we believe that the freedom to inquire is the awakening, the doorway to apprehend what is true. And I ask you, I pray, I hope that we may always have the courage to defend that faith, our faith in the many over the one. And so may it be. Amen and amen and amen. And willing to sing our closing hymn, number 119, Once to Every Soul and Nation.
further.